Hi, I'm Maura Mazurowski from Lawyers Weekly, here to talk to John Bredehoft, an employment lawyer with Kaufman and Knowles in Norfolk, Virginia. We're going to talk today about how employees should discuss any concerns they have with their employers regarding going back to work following closures due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So, John, how are you?
I'm fine. I hope that you are as well, Maura.
I am. I'm actually in my office for one of the first times today. I'm alone, which is no fun, and I do have to wear my mask coming in and out of the building, but it's nice to be back, definitely. But all that said, is this a topic that you've been talking with clients about lately?
Yes, clients are very concerned. I represent only employers, and they are very concerned about two things. The first thing, obviously, is making sure that their employees and their customers and their clients and the people come in are safe.
Mm-hmm.
And the second thing is making sure that their employees and customers, et cetera, all feel safe. And I get calls about this every day. Sometimes I get 4 or 5, or one day I got 14 calls about this. And I think there are a couple of important things that you need to think about. First, employees really need to realize that everybody is going through this. Okay? Yeah, maybe you're not the chief executive, but the chief executive is worried too. What we have is a situation where it's natural to be concerned. For example, I don't know if you've ever had a chance to go on a really long vacation and get away from it all for 3 or 4 weeks.
I got to do once.
Yeah, I remember I did that during the Harding administration, and it was great. But when you come back and you haven't driven a car for 4 weeks, you're worried, you're concerned. Or back when you're going to college and you have 4 months off in the summer, you're going back, you're a little concerned. And it's really even just starting something that you haven't done for a while,
right,
is a little nerve-wracking. Here, how much more nerve-wracking is it? There was a study, it wasn't scientifically rigorous, but it was anecdotal evidence, came out about a week ago about the effect of the pandemic and the coverage of the pandemic on dreams. And apparently we are dreaming more in color than we used to. Our dreams are more vivid and more able to be remembered. And unfortunately, we are dreaming a lot more about bugs because nobody talks about the virus being a bug. So employees need to realize, I think, that everybody's worried about this.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that some people are blithe and, I'm ready to go off and lick the handles of the Kroger grocery store doors. Some people are less concerned. Some people are very concerned. We're all on a continuum. And the first thing for employees to realize, and employers too, is that everybody has concerns. And maybe they all don't share your level of concern, or maybe they're even more concerned, but you should feel comfortable if you're an employee talking to your boss or human resources or whoever is there to talk to about this. That's the first thing.
So what are some changes that employers are making to the workplace right now, perhaps required to make to the workplace right now, that employees should expect to see upon returning back to work?
Well, there are a couple that are legally required, and then there are a couple that are just happening all over the place. We're here in Virginia, and as you know, I've been saying this a lot lately, you don't have to be a brain surgeon to run for governor, but I'm glad we have one. And Governor Northam just recently sort of went a little bit back. We went into phase 1 of returning to work, and we saw people immediately abandoning many of the social distancing conventions and everything. So Governor Northam imposed some additional legal restrictions, and all those that we're facing now. And as far as employees are concerned, any employee who is in a client-facing or customer-facing position at the current time in Virginia is required to wear a mask. Similarly, a client, a customer, a member of a bank or something who comes in is required to wear a mask. So we still have those, and we're required to social distance. we still have some legal requirements, and every employer is sensitive to them, and every employee should take some solace in that. But I also see most companies, most employers, and I work mostly with mid-sized employers, going beyond that and both implementing everything the CDC even suggests, much less requires as part of its recommendations, but also doing reminders to employees. And I think that's important because one of my favorite things in telling brand new lawyers, little baby lawyers, when they start, that it's important not only to be diligent, but also to have the appearance of diligence, because that's how you get people to have confidence in you. Same thing with employers. Employers need not only to be rigorous and supportive, but they also need to appear to be rigorous and supportive of their employees' health, because that's the way you get folks to relax. It's not enough to go around and give everyone a sanitizer. You want to go around, give everyone a sanitizer, and tell everyone that everyone else has a sanitizer, and everybody has to clean their hands at 11:15, 11:45, on the twice an hour. Because the more employees know about what the employers are doing to keep the workplace safe, the more accepting they'll be, the more relaxed I think the workplace will be.
Sure.
Some employers are also phasing employees back in. I was speaking with a number of folks even today who are having half their employees come in one week and half coming in the next week, which is sort of like getting into the pool, dipping your toe in to the cold water. I'm not sure if it's better just to jump in all at once, but in this circumstance, I think it is better to ease in because, and you mentioned earlier before we began recording that you're back at your office, but there's nobody there.
Exactly.
It's less scary to be back at the office and only a third of the people are there, or only a quarter of the people are there. It's much easier to do social distancing. It's much easier to remember to put your mask on when you're coming up to talk to someone with this sort of phased return. And I'm seeing that in an awful lot of contexts, even where it's not required by law.
Absolutely. So even if a business and an employer is taking all the necessary and legal steps to make their workplace a safe and healthy environment, let's say an employee is still nervous about going back to work during this time, how would you recommend or how would you advise an employee to approach their employer with these type of concerns?
Well, the first thing I'd say is you must approach somebody.
Right.
You should not keep them bottled up inside. That would be the worst thing. The second thing that an employee, I think, should keep in mind is that, as I mentioned earlier, everybody's worried about this. You would have to be a fool to be completely unworried about it. So go in with the attitude that the employer wants to hear from you and wants to make you feel better about being at work. And as I counsel my employers, that's the economically rational thing for an employer to do. I mean, you don't want terrified people huddling at their desks or workers who are afraid to talk to their customers. So first, the employee should realize that the employers want to hear this stuff. The second thing that I think will give heart to employees is that sometimes, and this is a gross under exaggeration, sometimes employees have good ideas that their employer hasn't thought of yet.
Sure.
In fact, 99% of the good ideas have come out of employee suggestions. So if you're concerned about something specific at the workplace, you should talk to your employer about it because maybe they just didn't think about that. Oh, we're not sanitizing the push bars on the library door. Oh my God, of course we should be doing that. Or something else. That's the first thing, be comfortable going to the employer. The second thing is that depending on where you are, what organization you're in, make sure you make your first contact with somebody that you're personally comfortable with. Because some of these discussions, I mean, again, we're on a continuum. Some of them will be, hey, I'm just really worried Joe's not wearing his mask. You can say that to the HR person. They'll go and yell at Joe. He'll put on his mask. Others may be much more intense. I'm frankly terrified about this. You know, what am I? I'm over 65, I'm obese, I have diabetes, I have an immune suppression system, I have this, I have that. I am terrified. What can you do to help me relax? And that's a discussion that an employee can only have with someone that they're comfortable with. So if that's their immediate supervisor, that's fine. If it's their boss's boss, that's fine. If it's someone at the same level of the organization who's been there for 20 years and you've only been there for 2 years, have the initial discussion with that person. Most HR people are open to this. Or if you feel, you know, kind of oppressed by your supervisors, but you admire the CEO, well, heck, send an email to the CEO. Can I talk to you for 5 minutes about this? That I think is the mindset that employees should have, because as I'm counseling employers, I'm sure everybody else is, employers want to hear this. They need to hear this. It's important that they hear this.
And having issues such as an autoimmune disease or being susceptible to the virus in some other way is a valid reason to postpone returning to the office, correct?
Well, here's the deal. When Congress was considering the very first of these bills, the Families First, that has the emergency paid sick leave in it and the FMLA expansion in it, they considered allowing emergency paid sick leave for people who had additional risk factors, but they didn't pass that. It was taken out of the bill. It was in some of the earlier bills. They considered allowing FMLA leave for people who had additional risk factors. They didn't pass it. They took it out of the bill. So from a legal perspective, does an employee who has enhanced vulnerability to the virus have a legal right to stay home? Probably not, unless their doctor orders them to.
Okay.
And I got to tell you, during the pandemic, doctors will order you to stay home. Okay.
And that's just another example of how important it is to talk to your employer, because they might be understanding of that.
Right.
And so conversely then, how would you recommend employers handle these types of conversations with employees and prepare to have these types of conversations with employees, knowing they'll likely have some concerns and anxiety about returning back to work?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the very first thing I ever said to any of my clients about anything related to coronavirus is be kind. And I think that's still important. I think that should be the mindset of the employer. There are folks out there who are, well, let's be frank, there are folks out there who try to game the system, okay? I woke up at age 10 sleeping out on a friend's porch with a giant brown spider on my face. And for 20 years, I was deathly afraid of spiders. And I could probably make an okay case that I need to be accommodated as someone with a mental disability of arachnophobia for some reason, and I don't have to go to my office if I see a spider. That's game in the system. and there are people, unfortunately, a very, 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 very small percentage of employees who try to game the system. Most don't. So I think employers need to come to the discussion with a mindset that these are people with genuine fears. They genuinely need to be addressed, and that addressing the fears is in the best interest of office harmony, as well as the best economic interest of the employer, because people aren't going to do their best for you while they're worried about coming down with a deadly disease.
Absolutely.
Whether or not their fears are rational. I mean, irrational fear is disabling as well. So I think that's how the employer needs to come to the discussion. And the employer also needs to realize, and keep in the back of their mind at least, that there are issues of legal rights that employees can have. I mean, it's possible, although I think it would happen in only very, very few cases, that someone has a genuine, I guess the term the statute uses is mental or emotional impairment that prevents them from coming to work, or a serious medical condition. Those are the two buzzwords for the Family Medical Leave Act and the ADA. And I'm not talking about expansion, I'm talking about the regular Family Medical Leave Act. And it's possible that someone may need to be accommodated by an extra week off under the regular ADA, or someone might want to make a family and medical leave act claim because they do have a phobic reaction to the possibility of infection that goes far beyond what is normal. Lord knows what is normal. I've given up trying to define that. But employers need to have that in the back of their minds, because it's possible that there will be a legal way for employees to be accommodated or allowed out on leave. Won't happen very often. So they do need to be sensitive to that. They obviously need to be sensitive to the situations that allow for emergency paid medical leave. They need to be sensitive to the situations which involve caring for kids only under the new expanded FMLA stuff. So there are some mindsets here that employers have to be careful about. They can't just say, "Ah, you're ridiculous," or "that's silly," or, you know, "go away and wash your hands." They need to listen. They need to listen carefully. And the employers who I speak with are all very anxious to listen, and to listen carefully. And if additional stuff needs to be done, it'll be done. And one, I should probably mention this, one thing that employers need to remember, and employees too, is that in serious cases, almost all employers now either have their own or participate in a joint EAP, Employee Assistance Program, where if an employee wants to, they can go get no-cost counseling or sit down and talk about their fears with someone. That, I think, will be a small, very small cohort. It'll be an exceptional circumstance, but it's a backstop in case of very severe anxiety.
Absolutely. And it's important to note that these are pieces of advice that lawyers can be taking too, because, you know, lawyers are going to start returning to firms soon. And I mean, they're just as susceptible to these anxieties and health risks.
Absolutely. In fact, the first official act that I knew of relating to the pandemic was when I went to Dulles Airport at the very first or second day of March, picked up my wife and son, who had made the really stupid decision to have spring break in Japan.
Oh, no.
And they'd been there for a couple of weeks, and I had not, but I drove them home and turned on my emails, and the first thing I saw was my firm saying, "We love you, John, but don't come in for 2 weeks."
Fair.
Law firms are places of employment like everywhere else. Lawyers, as I'm sure you know from dealing with them in your journalistic capacity, often are high-strung. And, you know, some of us are afraid of spiders. I mean, you know, there are lawyer wellness is an important component of this reopening procedure. And again, I speak to law firms. I represent a number of law firms, and they are acutely aware of the need for either a phased opening or for making principled exemptions for individuals who have predisposing underlying conditions, and for ensuring that everyone knows exactly what the firm, what the employer is doing to keep everyone safe.
Sure. Yeah, you can't take care of other people unless you take care of yourself first, right?
That's what my mom always told me.
Yeah.
Right before she grabbed a bottle of scotch.
Well, thank you again so much for speaking with me about this today. Is there any last piece of advice or any last thoughts you have on this topic?
Nothing really different. It's just going back to the first thing I said, and employers and employees should both do this. Approach this in a feeling of kindness, mutually getting through this. There is, and we're recording this on a day when the headlines on every major national newspaper are talking about political divisions and strife and physical violence, that we are a divided country about so many things. And some of that has bled over into, you know, is wearing a mask a pinko liberal snowflake thing to do? Is, you know, can I only support, you know, Second Amendment gun rights by coughing in people's faces? You know, that's ridiculous. This thing, we're all human. We're all in it together. Employers know that. Employees should rely on that.
Absolutely. And for what it's worth, I don't like spiders either. So I think that's a very fair fear.
Good.
So, well, thank you again so much for speaking with me. It's always a pleasure. And And yeah, stay safe and stay healthy.
You too, Maura. Always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, John.